All right, so let's begin. Welcome to Gem Talk today. We'll be talking about the book of Revelation. This might be a very interesting book for some, maybe an unfamiliar book for others. So I'm not going to make too many assumptions, but just so we can get a sense where everyone's starting off at. What is Revelation about? Now, I feel like we haven't used Menti in a long time. I guess thankfully we've been meeting in person, but we'll do that again. So why don't you go to this link and fill out what you think Revelation is about, what your impression of it is. So I'm going to try to make a point to give you enough time to go there. So let's just roll the music in the meantime. Let's see what we have here. Okay, final chapter, end of the world, vision of end times, end of the world, apocalypse, the end of the world, yes, end of the world, end, judgment day or nuclear war, the second coming. Cool. What else? So far, we've only had 9 people respond. Monster invasion. Oh, that's a good one. Empire. Vibin. Yeah, there are some vibes at the end of the book. Yep. Yes. Okay, someone is referring to Revelations chapter 3 here. Yep. Unknown world after rapture. Okay. Cool. Wow, that's definitely a good one. I do feel like 2022 has been all right. 2020 and 2021 though, those were having the shutdowns and then the Delta waves, though that's pretty terrible. Okay, all right, cool. Let me switch back to my other presentation, or the earlier presentation. So the typical understanding of Revelation is something like some of the responses that we got. The, I guess, workflow that is somewhat commonly believed to be the case is that at some point a significant amount of believers will be raptured into heaven, and those left behind will experience a lot of tribulations. The Antichrist, whose number is 666, will rise up and will rule the earth in a new world order. And later on, he will be defeated in the Battle of Armageddon, and God will bring about the new heaven and the new earth. So it definitely makes for a good story. In fact, even as I tell this, even in a very bland way, it still sounds interesting. But if we peruse the book of Revelations, there are some problems that are going to jump out. One is there's actually no mention of the rapture anywhere in Revelations. There is a mention of a rapture in 1 Thessalonians 4, but not in Revelation. So trying to fit it into a chronology is a little bit taking creative license, I would say. In Matthew 24, Jesus says, you can't know when the Son of Man will come back. Now, he does say you can know when the temple will be destroyed if you read closely in there, but specifically about the end times, he says no one knows that hour. And actually, there is no such thing as an Antichrist as an individual in the Bible. There is a mention of Antichrist plural in 1 John chapter 2, but this is just talking about people who have rejected the faith. It's not talking about some like opposite of Christ. So the book of Revelation is not about the end of the world, but this hasn't stopped people from trying to see the relationship between modern events and what's going on in Revelations. And there's actually a good reason for this, because the book Left Behind has left a really, really big impact on modern Christianity, because that's the one that details the chronology that I described in the previous slide. So in fact, it led one of the leading conservative Christian commentators in the United States to note, in terms of its impact on Christianity, it's probably greater than any other book in modern times outside the Bible. So it's heavily influenced how we see stuff like the Iraq War, the pandemic, and whatnot. So, but I don't believe that this is what Revelation is about for the reasons we discussed previously. So why the confusion? What has led people to believe this? I mean, I guess on one hand, you can understand, okay, if you read a book rather than actually reading Revelations, maybe you'd get confused. But why wouldn't the rather obvious problems I pointed out earlier not jump out? And why is the common interpretation of it being about the end of the world so compelling? Well, that's because Revelation is written as a series of visions, and there are a lot of things in the book that are hard to understand. We'll get to it in a second, but you see things like scorpions or locusts with scorpion tails, or beasts that have several heads, or the sun scorching a third of the earth, or stars falling out of the sky. So these kind of fantastical events can lead us to believe that, oh man, this must be referring to something cataclysmic. But it doesn't have to be like that. What does this sound like to you guys here? Now, I'm too scared to go to the Menti, so just put in the chat if this makes sense or if this is total nonsense. I'm curious. Don't be shy. Okay. Yes. All right. So clearly some people here are getting the reference. If you didn't know, thanks for the response, Devo and Rossi. Yes, it sounds like nonsense to a lot of people. If you try to fit this haiku, I guess, this 3 lines of sayings into your framework without knowing that what it's talking about, you could come to some very strange conclusions, right? You could think, okay, goreng monkeys. Well, clearly they're talking about cooking monkeys. Whales sweeping the floor. So this has to be like 100,000 years in the future when the whales evolve enough to grow legs and sweep the floor. And we know if something went to the moon, it has to be later than 1959 because that's when we first landed on the moon. So you could really jump to a lot of sense out of this, but if you know the reference that's being made, and I'm sorry if you do, it probably means you lost money, but that's okay. We're all in this together. Then it actually makes perfect sense. So I was going to quiz you if it made sense, but let's not run into another technical difficulty right now. So for those of you who don't know, it's making a reference to NFTs. And goreng our monkeys is slang for promoting our NFTs because NFTs have a tendency to be monkeys. And whale sweeping the floor is a meaning that wealthy investors will buy in, or at least they hope so. And my bags will go to the moon is just a very slang way of saying the portfolio increases in value significantly. So this makes perfect sense. There's nothing mysterious about it, even though it looks strange on the surface once you know the reference. But if you don't know the reference, you will not be able to make sense out of it. And that's one reason why Revelation can be so complicated on the surface, because it is full of references, as we will go into now. So the first reference is a vision that might seem strange. Now, one of these passages is from Revelations, and the other one is from somewhere. Else. And I'm not going to say what because I want the similarity to really jump out. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. Each 4 had the face of a human being, and on the right, each side had the face of a lion. On the left, the face of an ox. Each also had the face of an eagle. Such were their faces. I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. The rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around. In the center of the throne were 4 living creatures. Now, this is the other passage. And they were covered with eyes in front and back. The first living creature was like a lion. The second, like an ox. The third had a face like a man, and the fourth was like a flying eagle. Each of the 4 living creatures had 6 wings and was covered with eyes all around, even under its wings. Okay, so these passages seem suspiciously similar to each other, even though one's from Revelation and one is actually from Ezekiel. And let's look at another one. Here we have another vision, again one is from Ezekiel and the other one is from Revelation. And in the first passage, it says, "And he said to me, Son of man, eat what is before you. Eat this scroll, then go and speak to the people of Israel." So I opened my mouth, and he gave me the scroll to eat. Then he said to me, "Son of man, eat the scroll I am giving you and fill your stomach with it." So I ate it, and it tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth. Then he said to me, "Son of man, now go to the people of Israel and speak my words to them." Okay, so if you hear a story about somebody eating a scroll, that you're not going to forget that. I mean, hashtag Let's Eat a Scroll is not something that was ever trending. And if someone posted a picture of a scroll on their plate in the Gem Gourmet group, that would be kind of hard to forget, right? So let's read the other one, knowing that we have kind of an unforgettable vision over here. Then the voice that I had heard from heaven spoke to me once more. "Go, take the scroll that lies open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and on the land." He said to me, "Take it and eat it. It will turn your stomach sour, but in your mouth it will be as sweet as honey." So I took the little scroll from the angel's hand and ate it. It tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had eaten it, my stomach turned sour. Then I was told, "You must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings." Okay, so clearly there's a reference over here, right? So if the reference is being made, the author is trying to make a point. So what is that point? Well, first of all, we should note that these seem so similar that this is not happening by accident. It's certainly not a coincidence. Okay, we're going to look at another reference, but then we will look at the surrounding passage of what it's referring to. And then we will understand what the author is saying. So this midweek is primarily about beasts, actually. And we're going to understand what those beasts are because we know what the author is referring to. Okay, on the left, I'm not going to hide the passage location anymore. This is Daniel chapter 7. And here we see a description of beasts. And the parts here have been highlighted that I want you to notice the similarities in. In my vision at night I looked, and there before me were 4 beasts. There were 4 winds of heaven churning up the great sea. Oh, let's set the mood and turn the sea on. Okay, so now you imagine you're next to the ocean. 4 great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea. The first was like a lion, and it had wings of an eagle. And before me there was a second beast, which looked like a bear. After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard. After that, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying, frightening, and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. Okay, I don't have a visual of this, but if you really think about this, these crazy looking beasts coming out of the ocean, that's hard to miss, right? Well, Revelations makes a reference to this passage in Revelations chapter 13, which is where we are focusing. The dragon stood on the out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but it had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave his beast power and his throne great authority. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. And they also worshiped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it? Okay, so what do these beasts represent? Well, again, maybe this might sound like whales sweeping the floor, but luckily for us, if we continue reading in Daniel chapter 7, we actually get an explanation about what the author is referring to when he's talking about beasts. So let's continue. Later on in Daniel chapter 7, it says, so he told me and gave the interpretation of these things. The 4 great beasts are 4 kings that will rise from the earth. Then I wanted to know the meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others and most terrifying, with its iron teeth and bronze claws. Oh, iron teeth, sorry. And bronze claws. The beast was the beast that crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. He gave me this explanation. The 4th beast is a 4th kingdom that will appear on the earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. Now, note in the previous passage, in Revelations, we don't get an explanation for what the beast is, but we can see so many similarities between the beast in Revelation and Daniel chapter 7 that when we look at the reference in 7, we know what the author is talking about. And that's how the author of Revelation, John, is the book. So the beasts are worldly kingdoms because it says, well, what does it say? The 4th beast is a 4th kingdom. And it's clearly something that had inspired awe and wonder in people. So how could it do that? Well, we'll get more into it later, but he's writing this during the time of Rome, which is obviously a forgotten empire at this point. But when we look at modern superpowers, like let's say China and the US at this point in time, it's oftentimes hard not to have a response like the people had towards the beast. Who is like the beast and who can wage war against it, were what people said about it. So you can look at something like, wow, these militaries are, one boat carries more planes than most countries have. And this army is bigger than most countries. And look at how much money is in their financial system. Look at the development of their countries. Look at the political influence that they hold. These must be like the ultimate powers in the world. And that has been historically how humans and their relationship to worldly powers has been. And that's what the book of Revelations is warning us against. But it doesn't stop there, because beasts are not only all about power, they're about what the power does for us. So let's continue. We were just in chapter 13 when reading about the beast coming out of the sea. And obviously, because we have to do this presentation in a reasonable amount of time, we have to skip most of the book. But we're going to jump forward to chapter 17, where the beast with all these heads and horns appears again. So let's do that. In chapter 17, it says, there I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. Remember the 10 horns? The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and the beast she rides, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. This calls for mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are the 7 hills on which the woman sits. The woman you saw is the great city of the earth. Now, I'm not jumping forward randomly when I needed to get returned to the beast, but it's worth noting that he says he was greatly astonished, which, if you think about it, is kind of a strange statement to make. We've just been seeing beasts coming out of the ocean. We've been seeing someone eating a scroll. We've been, seeing all these natural disasters. But John's response up until this point has been something like this. It doesn't express astonishment. Oh, we'll have, how about locusts with scorpion tails? A beast with several heads. How original. Fire and hailstones? Daring today, aren't we? So when he sees a woman riding a beast, though, his response is like this. So why this incongruency? Well, that's the author calling us attention to a very important point. Revelations chapter 18, which follows right after where we just read, contains the only general command in the book. We can read all these visions, but when it tells us to do something, we should probably pay attention. And we will get to that in a second. Now, it doesn't say explicitly why John was astonished, but it's clear he saw something he didn't expect. Otherwise, he wouldn't be astonished. And the reason for that is because the church had been too involved in the power and luxury of Rome. Towards the end of the passage we just read, it said, this calls for mind of wisdom. The 7 heads are the 7 hills on which the woman sits. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. So at the time, that was Rome, but also the 7 hills are supposed to be another reference. Now, I don't know if I have a mind of wisdom, but I definitely know how to use Google. And when I checked city with 7 hills, it definitely came out the way I expected it to. So he's talking about the church's involvement in worldliness. So what does this mean? Well, if we read the actual passage where the instruction is, I said there, Revelation only gives one general instruction. Let's read it in chapter 18. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven. With a mighty voice, he shouted, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, a dwelling place for demons and a haunt for every impure committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries. Then I heard another voice from heaven say, come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues. For her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her crimes. In her heart she boasts, I sit enthroned as a queen. I am not a widow. I will never mourn. So the woman is Roman. What was she characterized by in this passage? What was God criticizing her for? Well, we see that she was guilty of excessive luxury. Clearly, she thinks very highly of herself, almost to the point of worshiping herself. Look at how she talks about herself. And God is saying, don't be influenced by this. So Revelation has 2 main points in it, which are really 2 sides of the same coin. One is, do we worship power? Are we like the people who look at the beast and say, who is like the beast and who can wage war against it? It's very easy for this mindset to slip in. I remember back in America, sometimes when we're talking about companies, oh, maybe we should do this. Oh, wait. No, if you do this, you're competing with Amazon and you will definitely lose and no one can wage war against Amazon. So that's kind of a trivial example, but just a mindset of like, oh, this is so powerful and this is like the be all end all. It's very easy for that mindset to slip into our lives, and in a lot more areas than just commerce. It can be huge militaries, huge capital markets, political power, good infrastructure, things like, wow, there's so much power here. This is what I need to make my life about. But God sees these stuff as beasts. And the question is, do we get our security from those? But it doesn't stop there, because sometimes, we can be the beneficiary of power. And then that can, in the end, result in self-worship. Remember how the woman on the beast talked about herself? So clearly she was benefiting from this beast. It was, presumably it was protecting her. But it said, just to read again, it says, in her heart she boasts, I am not a widow, I will never mourn. So she lost touch with reality and thought that her power came from herself. Like, there's nothing special about her. She's riding the beast, she's getting all the power, but it had gotten to her head. And the Bible also condemned her for excessive luxury. Now, the Bible does not condemn luxury, just to be clear. I'm not saying, oh, if you have XYZ worth more than ABC dollars, you're sinning. No. And let's be clear, in 1 Timothy 6, verse 10, which I have over here, it says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. So there's nothing wrong with rich people enjoying what God is giving them. But we shouldn't be arrogant like this woman was, or to put our hope into wealth. So this is where I'm going to pause the my part of this midweek, and we will have some wonderful people sharing, Gio and Rosalind. So if DJ, you could spotlight them, please, and we will switch to their segment.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome sharing, Jeff. I'm glad that you picked this topic, bro, for the midweek. So we don't have to read Revelation and get confused ourselves. I think what we learned today is very very easy to understand. Yeah, I think that the book of Revelation is quite complicated. Yeah, and but it makes it very simple if we understand like the context, right? Like for instance, like the beast part, it's actually this written in Daniel, so we can what is it actually talking about. And I think you put it very clearly. But yeah, for today, I'm gonna share a little bit about what I think about the beast. And I think, to put it quite bluntly, after I reflect, I think I'd say that I'm definitely still a beast worshiper. Although that I'm not very passionate or care so much about like world powers or armies or like strong nation, but I think I definitely put a lot of like other type of beasts, other type of powerful things in this world on top of a pedestal. Yeah, I think even as the disciple, I feel that I really highly look up to people who are successful, or companies or organizations that are very powerful, very successful. I can say that I can think more highly of someone if I see them like already achieve a strong position of like leadership, or if I've seen them achieve success. And I say I worship them because because I feel that I can be very passionate, just to study, look at to these people, right? Study what makes them tick, what is their road, how did they achieve this power. And mostly it's because having the ambition, having the selfish ambition to want to achieve the same thing, I think. And I don't think it's wrong, like Jeff alluded to, like there's nothing wrong with like power or luxury. But I think I feel that it's only wrong when you just when it's just wrong. sorry. Yeah, it's not wrong to look up to these things, right? Or have the luxury and stuff, but I just think it's wrong when you worship them more than you worship God. Yeah. And I think I can be guilty in terms of my passion or my tenacity in, like looking up to these people or companies or leaders, and being in awe of them can sometimes trump my awe versus compared to God. And I think I think what I reflected and learned the most from the sharing is that no matter how much like respect and esteem that you have for these people, I need to remember that God still sees them as a worldly power and as beasts. And no matter how amazing or how much like positivity that these people have made, it still doesn't mean that I have to worship them, right? And I reflected that, I can respect them and I can follow them and learn from them, but it still doesn't mean I have to worship them. And that's my main takeaway. I think my faith should be more on following God, and learning from God more compared to learning from these powers or these people or these beasts. And I think the verse that comes most to mind is Matthew 6:24, which is basically, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money, or God and beast or power. And honestly, this verse is something that I don't think I've fully figured out yet, on about loving God so much that you can say that that it can seem that people can see that you love God so much, tapi to the point that it seems like you hate the beast, gitu kan. And I think this is something that honestly still quite difficult to to accept, I guess. But that's just like what came the most to mind, say, as I was studying out and listening to Jeff about the beast thing. Again, there's nothing wrong with any of this. It's just like to what extent, to what extent you rely or find security in or passionate about, to the point that it seems like you're worshiping them gitu kan, whereas we have to worship God the most. So I think that's my main takeaway, and yep, that's what I can share tonight, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice job, Jeff.
Thank you. All right. Can we spotlight Ross now?
Okay, I'll share now. Thanks, Jeff and Gio, for sharing. And thanks, Jeff, for the great idea to make Revelations kind of come to life and applicable in our life now, and not just like a storybook that you read at the end of the Bible. So hi, everyone. My name is Rosalind, and thanks for letting me share a little bit today. I guess just a little background about me. Growing up, my family was quite successful and privileged. But it wasn't until our teenage years where my father's business really took off and gained significant monetary success. So I grew up in a lot of comfort and a lot of luxury. We went on holidays, sat in business class, we went shopping, and we were never lacking for like anything material. And I don't think we ever had to like really worry about money, or like we were very privileged in that way. But I never quite saw myself as materialistic, but because I never really coveted branded things. But I think growing up in this kind of environment definitely affected my mindset about how I view money and material possessions, and I guess like luxury, if we want to kind of relate it to the woman in the passage. I remember that as I got older, there was an expectation that I had to keep up with this image that I had to keep. I had to be wearing the right bags or wearing diamond earrings to show people who I was, or to dress a certain way. I mean, I was lucky that my parents were religious too, and that they showed a great example of like tithing, and also not being lovers of money. But at the same time, it was really competing with this pressure of looking the part of where we are in society. So growing up, I was a tomboy, and I never really put any effort in how I looked up until university, which is why my mother and sister really pushed me to, putting a looking good. She would take note that I saw just how much thought she put, and how a lot of people are put into the image that they presented to society or to everybody else. I remember her saying about how when we're meeting with our extended family, that I should always be wearing a branded bag, or how I needed to wear diamond earrings so that people could know exactly what kind of family we came from or who we are. And I see that as it's all coming from her love for me, but I think it also made me feel sad. It made me feel sad that my family members or people around me would only respect me if they see that I had the right bag or the right earring. And it was something that I feel I couldn't accept and I didn't like. But I think how my background really affected me is that I put a lot of security on money. I felt like if anything was to go wrong, I would be okay because I'd have money in the bank, or that my parents could help me. And God was the last resort. And the way that this came up about was when my husband and I were discussing on what to do with some of our savings that we had accumulated a couple of years after we got married. I wanted to keep it in the bank because cash is king, but my husband wanted to invest it in something. But I was so unwilling to let it go because I felt so insecure that if we used our savings, it would decrease dramatically. And I felt like investing our savings was a risk that I wasn't willing to take. And I think that revealed exactly like where my heart was and where my treasure was. Like TJ shared on Sunday, follow our treasure and there your heart will also be. And I think it really showed how much I was putting my security and how much I was relying on money that I had in the bank instead of trusting and relying on God. Because no matter what I had in the bank or if it was invested in something, it could all potentially go away. Like in Matthew 6, verse 19, it says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and vermin can destroy and where the thieves break in and steal. And I think it also taught me that God shouldn't be like my plan D or my plan E, but he should always be my plan A. Not to say that like we shouldn't save, but it shouldn't be the thing that we put our security and hope in. And the funny thing is, I feel like when my husband and I were really able to check our hearts and when we could be generous with the blessings that God has given us, when we can give back to the church and to those in need through our tithing, I feel like God has really taken care of us. Every year, he has always blessed us financially. And not to say that we should give so that we can get more, but I think both of us has found the conviction that the blessings we receive from God is not just for us to enjoy this world, but also for us to help others and for us to be able to give our time and to serve him. I think the book of Revelations teaches us a valuable lesson that is echoed throughout the Bible, that things of this world that we put our security in, or things that are seemingly stable and don't hold as much value in comparison, to the value and security that God gives us. And the security that God gives us is not just for this life, but for the reality of eternity as well. So yeah, thanks.
Wow, thank you. That was very powerful. Yeah. Yeah. Moth, vermin, and inflation. They definitely get us nowadays, don't they? Okay, so let's bring this in for a landing. The question we want to ask ourselves is our life built on beasts? And the other one comment I have to make is, okay, why did the author go, we had to spend about 30 minutes explaining where the author was coming from. So why doesn't he just say outright, hey guys, don't trust worldly things? Why does it have to use all of this imagery? Well, the first point is that he's obviously criticizing Rome. And if he does that, anybody who's reading the letter will get in trouble. So he needs to publish something that sounds strange, like goreng goreng the monkey so the whales will sweep the floor and so on, so that his readers won't get in trouble. But on the other hand, it's not cryptic. This is rather perfect timing because their church is going through the book of Ezekiel right now. And you will see a lot of parallels between the structure of Ezekiel and Revelations, how the books begin, how they end, and other structures that I'm going to point out in a second. So if you're familiar with the book of Ezekiel, then Revelation's message is not mysterious. As Roz alluded to, this is a theme throughout the Bible. If we put our trust in the wrong things, it's not going to end well. So the book of Revelation is about how a worship of power leads to a worship of self. Remember, it started with the beast and then ended with the woman. So this is something God warns throughout the Old Testament, and you'll see it repeated many times in the book of Ezekiel. So the questions we have to ask ourselves are, do we worship beasts? Do we depend on the power they provide? Do we derive comfort and security from them? Is our life built on them? So these are going to be our questions for reflection. If you want to study Revelation some more, what I would really recommend doing is going through Ezekiel very carefully. And when you read it, try to imagine the imagery that you're seeing so that it will jump out at you again when you read the book of Revelation. And maybe I think, you can consult some helpful materials like the Bible Project to really understand how Ezekiel is structured, because admittedly, it's not an easy book to read. But once you get it, Revelation really comes to life. Daniel and Zechariah and the plagues in Exodus are actually a theme that's revisited in the book of Revelation. So if you read those books carefully, Revelations will come even more to life. And you'll just be seeing, oh, I got the reference, I got that reference, I got that reference, I got that reference. It won't seem so mysterious. And another thing that can help illuminate the book is how it's structured. So maybe some of you have seen this before. So this is a chiasm, which is a Hebrew device for drawing attention to important things. So when you see the author speaking about something, they'll structure the book in such a way that it follows this pattern. So what might seem like a bunch of random disasters like the bowls of wrath and the trumpets, which are, bringing down hail from heaven, actually mirror each other in how the book is structured. The book starts and ends with a vision of God in heaven, which is actually how Ezekiel is structured also. And the letters to the 7 churches, this is where the churches receive different instructions, like don't be lukewarm, don't drift away, don't accept false doctrines, is flipped on the other side where the other instruction appears, which is to come out of Rome and not be influenced by it. So there's a lot to explore. I certainly can't get into all of it here, but Revelation can be a very exciting book. So thanks for listening. And that concludes our midweek.